Sayın Başkan,
Distinguished President, distinguished Secretary General, esteemed heads of states and governments, valuable guests, delegates, I greet you on behalf of my personal self, my country, and my nation with the utmost respect. I hope that the 71st session of the UN General Assembly will succeed in its purposes and lead to favorable results for all countries and nations. I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate His Excellency Peter Thompson for taking over the presidency, and I thank His Excellency Mogens Lykketoft for his work during his presidency, and wish him luck in his future endeavors as well. I also would like to thank His Excellency Ban Ki-moon for his valuable contributions, as he will be leaving behind a 10-year tenure as the UN Secretary General, which he served during a time of global challenges. Distinguished President, esteemed delegates, within the first quarter of the 21st century, mankind has reached the peak in achievements in science, technology, economic development, and health. However, this brilliant picture has also a very disgraceful, a very dark face. In Syria, in Iraq, and in many countries which are suffering in the grip of terrorism and war, all around the world, hundreds of thousands of children, women, young and elderly, get killed. Refugees running away from death and tyranny and oppression unfortunately face degrading treatment in many European cities. Terrorist organizations such as Daesh, al-Nusra, and YPG-PYD continue their attacks and actions in the region. There is a big potential that the disputes in the Caucasus may unfold into a full-fledged fight. Many problems from Yemen to Ukraine are of particular urgency, and on the other side, people in many countries of the world struggle with hunger, epidemics, poverty, and illiteracy. This is a disgraceful picture, damaging the human dignity, and it's disturbing the human conscience. What's even more distressing than that is that many of these crises and problems can easily be resolved. Peace, prosperity, and security of our future generations depend highly on the steps and measures that we will or we shall take today. It's nighttime to show leadership with a sense of responsibility in addressing these problems in a determined fashion. Distinguished President, esteemed delegates, today, terrorist organizations can employ various methods. On the night of July the 15th, we, Turkey, were exposed to a malicious coup attempt initiated by the Fethullahist terrorist organization, aka FETÖ. This terrorist organization murdered 241 citizens and injured 2,194 people. Our parliament, the presidential complex, and many units of our security organizations and law enforcement were bombed by this terrorist organization using fighter jets, F-16s. Tanks roll over the streets as well as over the people. Helicopters and military vehicles opened fire on civilians. This coup attempt was successfully repelled by our nation, protecting heroically her democracy, government, freedoms, future, and constitutional order. That's why I take pride in my nation, as my nation defeated this heinous coup attempt by risking their lives, and for a period of 29 days, they never abandoned the squares around the cities of Turkey, and they remained on duty to protect our democracy. They threw their bodies in front of the tanks and they repelled this coup attempt. They showed a very noble stance. If I stand here today before you, it is thanks to our nation's brave stance and noble stance. It should never be forgotten that the failed coup in Turkey was aimed at the global democracy as well. Our nation taught a historical lesson to those intending to plot coup attempts and became a source of inspiration for all nations committed to the protection of democracy. This new generation of a terrorist organization is indeed a national security threat, not only for Turkey, but also for all the 170 countries around the world where it is present. In other words, today, the majority of the countries represented in this General Assembly is currently under the threat of this clandestine structure. This terrorist organization is in a deep mental heresy of subduing the whole world, far beyond Turkey. They are deviated in their actions, and the basic strategy of this terrorist organization is infiltrating the state institutions, influencing the society, and dominating the economic resources under the disguise of education, dialogue, tolerance, non-governmental organizations, and best of intentions. From this podium, I would like to call upon all our friends to take the necessary measures against the Fethullahist terrorist organization in their own countries for the future of their own people and their well-being. It is evident by the experience that if you do not fight against FETÖ now, tomorrow might be too late. On this occasion, I also would like to state that the attributions such as Turkish or Turkey used by this terrorist organization and all the other labels therein and the persons associated henceforth have no association with Turkey whatsoever. Mr. President, esteemed delegates, the humanitarian crisis in Syria has reached its 6th year. Until today, 600,000 people have reportedly lost their lives, and because of this war, 12 million people have had to leave their countries, leave their motherlands. 5 million of those found refuge in other countries. 2.7 million of those refugees are currently in my country. They were forced to leave behind their homes, and those Syrians were welcome in our homes. We never ask why they ended up in Turkey. Our doors are wide open. We haven't shut their doors on their faces because they were fleeing barrel bombs. They were fleeing fighter jets. And for these people, we had to assume our responsibilities and serve what it was expected of us. The West may not. The rest of the world may not, but we will keep on admitting them in because we are human beings. And in the face of such an atrocity, we are obliged to keep our doors open to all those fleeing tyranny and oppression. We have opened our doors, we keep our doors open, and we will keep on opening our doors in the future. The international community have unfortunately remained indifferent to the suffering of the people in the conflict zones. The numbers that we pronounce are in return representative of a human person, of a human being. Syrian people are being exhausted in the grip of proxy wars, which have been shaped by a cruel administration, merciless terrorist organizations, global and regional competition. In this process, unfortunately, the international community failed in humanitarian values and collective conscience. Until today, we've spent $12.5 billion for the refugees. Along with the NGOs and along with the municipalities, the number reaches about $25 billion in total. So what have you received from the rest of the world might be the next question you might have in your minds. The United Nations, under the roof of which we are present, we've only received $525 million in aid. Nothing else. Nothing else. Have we received anything from the EU? Well, the EU made certain promises, but they were not kept, unfortunately. They have allocated $178 million to UNICEF. That's it. But as Turkey, we haven't directly received any aid whatsoever in financial terms. Since the beginning of the conflict, we claimed that this was a common question for the rest of the world. And we've been establishing close contacts and solidarity with international and global influential figures. The Syrians are our neighbors, are our brothers and sisters, and we couldn't remain silent in the face of such a tragedy and such carnage, and we have never remained silent, and we shall never remain silent. 2.7 million refugees are currently being housed in our country, and 300,000 Iraqis are currently living in Turkey. And a total number of 3 million refugees have never been subjected to any ethnic or religious discrimination whatsoever, and we have opened our arms wide. The tent cities or container cities in Turkey where we accommodate these refugees, we will keep on providing all forms of support within our capabilities, primarily the EU and all the other organizations that have pledged financial support are expected to rise up to the occasion, and we expect them to keep their promises. Similarly, the UN, we expect them to keep their promises. I hope and pray that the 71st General Assembly will convey this voice quite loudly to the rest of the world, because the contribution of the international community shall not be confined to $525 million. What do you think? From this podium, I would like to call upon the rest of the world, and I would like to call out to all of my European friends who believe that Syrian refugees are a direct and a clear danger for them. The barbed wires and the high walls will never provide you with the safety and security and peace of mind that you seek out for. It's an effort in vain. The Syrian refugees and their problems should be solved immediately and once and for all, or else we will never be able to prevent the irregular migration, social issues, and security risks embedded within that problem. We cannot lose any more time for terminating the conflict, terrorism, and environmental persecution, which are the direct sources of the problem in Syria, and for the eventual implementation of the political settlement process once and for all. Dear friends, we attach great significance to the protection of the territorial integrity and political unity of Syria. We have no expectations whatsoever with regards to the territory of Syria. Syria belongs to the Syrian people. Nobody should ever have any plans whatsoever about the Syrian territory. Starting with our support for the Syrian opposition, the Operation Euphrates Shield was initiated, which is of crucial significance for the reestablishment of stability, peace, and prosperity in a region of despair. It is obvious that with this operation, the priority of the terrorist organization PKK or PYD is not fighting Daesh. This operation, or this offensive, if you will, has also popped up the self-confidence of the moderate Syrian opposition troops. Even further than that, this development has encouraged the local forces in Iraq who are eager to cleanse Mosul of the terror of Daesh. As you are probably aware, for a very long time now, I have appealed for the establishment or declaration of a safe zone along our border with Syria, which is longer than 911 kilometers. We have the longest border with Syria. And from these borders, Turkey is continuously under threat. We were very patient. However, on August the 24th, in the city of Gaziantep, right next to the Syrian border, a wedding party was attacked by a 14-year-old suicide bomber, a young boy who was sent there by the Daesh terrorists. And after the blast, 56 people were killed and more than 100 civilians were injured. We were patient until that pinnacle moment, and that was the actual time when we said enough is enough. And with the moderate opposition, we've initiated this offensive primarily within Jarablus. We have wiped out Daesh, and we have extended our operations all the way to El Rai, where Daesh was repelled. So the local inhabitants of Jarablus were resettled. Similarly, the local inhabitants of Al Rai were resettled. From Azaz to Euphrates, the entire region was saved from becoming a belt of terrorism. Instead, it was converted into a belt of peace. The operations we're conducting today has the eventual goal of protecting this safe zone and make this zone actually a safe zone. The Jarablus people were saved from the grip of terrorists, and they have the confidence to go back to their homes. The electricity and the water infrastructure will be rendered operational immediately. The Turkish Red Crescent, the Turkish Humanitarian Aid Associations, and all of the other NGOs have mobilized their capabilities to meet the needs of the local inhabitants. All the social facilities, which can also be used by the local inhabitants, will be constructed in the near future. In order for that to be possible, the safe zones, officially made safe zones, should also be declared as no-fly zones. And we have to have a very firm stance so that a no-fly zone will be possible for the protection and the security of the inhabitants of the region. Unfortunately, the ceasefire, to which we've invested heavily efforts in the realization, has failed. As you can clearly see, ceasefire is no longer possible. And yesterday, the United Nations convoy was attacked by the forces of the regime, in the aftermath of which one person died and multiple people got injured. The Syrian regime has not allowed assistance under the supervision of the United States to reach the people of Aleppo who are in dire need. They are attacking the humanitarian aid convoys. Regime is condemning people to famine and to suffering in order to encourage them to surrender or die. The United Nations and the Security Council should no longer tolerate the regime's policy. Distinguished President, esteemed delegates, in Iraq, it is clear that it will not be easy to establish a political system which will effectively protect ethnic and sectarian diversity, comprising in its essence the greatest underlying force of this country. Within this context, the Mosul operation should be conducted by taking into consideration the sensitivities of the people of the region. Otherwise, a new humanitarian crisis will emerge, leading to an influx of yet another 1 million people to seek refuge in other countries. We cannot leave the Iraqi people alone in this critical turn of tide, where they need the international support more than ever. Allowing the Palestinian people to live in an independent Palestine, with East Jerusalem as its capital, based on two-state solution, is an obligation of the international community towards the Palestinian children, if not for anything else. Especially Israel should respect the sanctity of Temple Mount and put an end to the violations vis-à-vis its status. We will try to benefit from our normalized relations with Israel to facilitate the peace process and solve the economic and humanitarian challenges that the Palestinian brothers and sisters face with every extent possible. So within this direction, we will continue our efforts to send humanitarian assistance to Gaza Strip. This brings me to a very important point. The World Humanitarian Summit was held in the month of May in Turkey for the first time in history. We considered this summit as an important opportunity to explore new ways of more effective crisis intervention around the world. I would like to be very clear in my remarks. In terms of providing support to the LDCs around the world, Turkey, UK, and America rank amongst the top 3. But compared to the humanitarian aid to GDP ratio, Turkey ranks number 1 around the world. And we are the only country that houses the most significant number of refugees around the world, and we are doing everything within our capability to stop irregular migration. And upon the initiative of Turkey, the subject of Syrian refugees was handled in the UN General Assembly last year for the first time. And similarly, migration and terrorism were incorporated within the G20 agenda thanks to the efforts invested by Turkey. We are in cooperation with the EU vis-à-vis the refugee crisis at the utmost extent possible, with an eventual goal of preventing deaths occurring in the Aegean Sea. We succeeded in reducing the number of irregular migration to 50, which previously reached 7,000 per day in October 2015. This shows that Turkey has successfully fulfilled her commitments within the framework of the refugee agreement with the EU. However, we regret that the promises made by the EU within the framework of the agreement of March 18, 2016 have been forgotten, and some artificial pretexts are being created on a continuous basis, and all we hear are excuses and nothing else. Distinguished President, esteemed guests, the United Nations Security Council should be reformed in order to render peacekeeping and peacemaking activities more effective. And we fully appreciate the steps taken forward by Secretary General Ban Ki-moon in that direction. In addition, it is obvious that unless the Security Council, which is the main instrument responsible for maintenance of international peace and security, is reformed, these efforts will be in vain, not fulfilling their full capacity. That's why we say that the world is greater than 5. This is a fact that we remind the international community over and over again with every chance that we get. Because in the aftermath of the First World War, the Security Council was formed. You cannot preserve the same structure under the circumstances of the modern times. You cannot condemn the fate of the rest of the world within the lips of these 5 countries represented within the Security Council. 5 permanent seat holders, 15 non-permanent seat holders within the Security Council. This is not a Security Council to have. A Security Council that does not represent the entire world can never serve to reestablish peace and justice around the world. This is something that we need to revisit over and over again. Can you think about that? 3 countries in Europe, 1 country in Asia, and 1 country, the United States, of course, 5 countries as the permanent seat holders. So what about the rest of the world? What about the other countries around the world? We put them aside. We ignore them. Instead, we claim that 20 countries, let's say, they should be within the Security Council. They will all be permanent seat holders. And on a rotational basis, every 2 years, these countries can occupy different seats. And all of those countries will be represented within the Security Council in a rightful manner. This is the only way to establish fairness and justice once and for all. The representative nature of the Security Council should be established so that the Security Council will be much more effective, much more just and fair. In order for that to be possible, the General Assembly has to reach the utmost consensus. Please do not even consider remaining silent, or else we can't achieve anything. We can't succeed in our policies. We have to have a spine, if you will. We have to be strong. We have to stand on our 2 feet and talk about the truth and nothing else but the truth. And we have to stand behind the truth. We are the politicians. Only through that way the world can achieve the level of justice that she yearns for. This is the only way to get democracy going. Islamophobia is the alternative name to racism and discrimination, and it is very important for a country with a vast majority of inhabitants as Muslims. About a decade ago, with the then Prime Minister of Spain, we had co-chaired the initiative of Alliance of Civilizations, which sought for finding permanent solutions to such dangerous movements threatening our prosperity around the world. Similarly, we are also glad that the interest for Mediation for Peace initiative that we have pioneered with Finland in 2010 under the roof of the UN has increased. The 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development that we have jointly created incorporates ambitious and transformative goals for us all. The official development assistance comprises the most important resource of supporting development efforts of especially the least developed countries around the world. Turkey's official development assistance has reached $3.9 billion in 2015. And as I've previously mentioned, 0.54% of our GDP is the ratio to humanitarian aid that we provide is beyond the OECD average and help us approach the UN target, which is 0.7%. As Turkey, we have surpassed our commitment to provide $200 million annually to the LDCs in 2011 and delivered more than $1.5 billion to LDCs in a mere period of 5 years. Distinguished friends, before concluding my remarks, I hope and pray that the 71st General Assembly will be a beginning of a new age to relieve the pain and the suffering of the people around the world. And it will help us change our world. And I would like to greet you all on behalf of my personal self and on behalf of my nation. May you all live in peace and prosperity.
On behalf of the General Assembly,